mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA.
Hello, I'm Esther Githu Yuat. It's Tuesday, August 8th. This is Africa 54. The United States backs efforts by West African countries to restore constitutional order in Niger, saying diplomacy is preferable to military intervention. To escape the fighting, Sudanese refugees flee across the border and into Chad via horse-drawn carts. And amid their struggle for survival in Somalia, Syrian refugees dream of returning home. We'll have a report from Mogadishu. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. There is an unsettling feeling blanketing Niger on Tuesday as the political crisis deepens and residents face a growing uncertainty about whether the West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, is going to follow through on its threat to use military force in an attempt to reinstall ousted President Mohamed Bazoum following a coup nearly 2 weeks ago. Mutinous soldiers overthrew their democratically elected leader, and ECOWAS had given the mutinous soldiers until Sunday to release and reinstall Bazoum, or else they use force. Members from ECOWAS, the United Nations and the African Union are meeting Tuesday in Niamey, according to a foreign official. Acting U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, who traveled to Niger on Sunday in an effort to jumpstart diplomacy talks, says the junta was unreceptive to her call for a negotiated solution. The White House is closely watching Niger's coup leaders after they chose not to meet a Sunday deadline to return the elected president to power, and after regional powers failed to act on their threat of military action. Meanwhile, the U.S. is pausing aid to the impoverished West African nation. VOA's Anita Powell has more from Washington.
In Niger's capital, Niamey, supporters of Niger's military coup were defiant, despite warnings from regional leaders and the West, as junta leaders continue to hold the president captive more than a week after they seized power.
The
National Council for the Safeguard of the Country warns ECOWAS and the foreign power against all interference in the internal affairs of Niger, as well as the disastrous consequences of this military adventure on the security of our sub-region, its stability, and the unity of our community.
To symbolize their seriousness, protesters in Niamey on Sunday slaughtered a rooster painted with the tricolor of former colonizer France. Sunday's deadline to return President Mohamed Bazoum to power came and went. From captivity, he managed to dictate an editorial to the Washington Post, in which he said the coup, led by the head of his presidential guard, has no justification whatsoever. The Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, threatened to use force if Bazoum was not released. The body will now hold an emergency summit Thursday. Niger is a key U.S. security partner in the unstable Sahel region. On Monday, Pentagon officials said there was no change to the force posture of the hundreds of U.S. troops there, and no plans to evacuate them. Niger, one of the world's poorest countries, has the highest fertility rate in Africa and depends heavily on foreign aid. On Monday, the State Department discussed its decision to cut aid.
It's a significant amount. I don't have a number because it's a pause, and it's a pause that we would hope would be reversed if the junta leaders would step aside and restore constitutional order tomorrow. That pause would be the pause would go away and security assistance would be reinstated. But as we've made clear, hundreds of millions of dollars are at stake.
But the junta leaders have some support, analysts say, as their counterparts in nearby Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea have come out on their side and held meetings with the Niamey group.
They're afraid of a regional economic community intervening and restoring democracy, and that's not what they stand for. I guess it shows how fearful they are that a values-based intervention that is a lot about preserving and supporting democratic process and accountable government is something that they don't welcome.
So with this testy region bristling with anti-Western vibes, what can the wider world do?
Any action by international partners, be they France or the United States, could be misinterpreted, misconstrued. So I think it is prudent of the Pentagon just to keep their people in place and kind of watch out as the mediation politics and possibly military intervention planning continues.
Meanwhile, in Niamey, residents have been stockpiling food and supplies for what could be a tense week ahead. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
For more on the situation in Niger, I'm joined in studio by Abdulrahman Dia, VOA French to Africa Managing Editor. Abdulrahman, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther.
This morning, an ECOWAS official told me, he's in charge of peace and security, told me he was heading to Niamey. We do know that the junta has reservations about anybody visiting, Niamey. What more do you know about the meeting that was supposed to take place in Niamey from the ECOWAS officials?
Well, most likely the trip will not happen after the junta made a statement saying that they would not want the mission to arrive in Niamey. They were not ready to receive them for security reasons, basically, saying that there was a lot of anger from the population following the sanctions. So for that reason, they were not ready to receive them. So for those who are having a lot of hopes for this mission, I think there would be a lot of disappointment.
Okay, now we just mentioned that U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland was there in Niamey. It was expected she would have meetings. She would probably even want to meet ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. It doesn't appear that that happened. But what was the other outcome of that meeting?
Well, she said that she met with some junta leaders, not the top leaders. She did have a 2-hour meeting. But from what we can see from her statement is that she did not get the outcome that she was expected. She did not meet with President Bazoum. She did not meet with General Chani, who is the head of the junta. But yeah, she did meet with other partners. But it doesn't look like that was the outcome that she was expecting.
We understand that now the junta has appointed a prime minister. What do we know about this prime minister? And number two, does that mean that there's a new government in the works?
Well, this new prime minister, his name Ali Maman Lamine Zen, is not really unknown to Nigerians. He was the head of the finance ministry around 2010, and when President Maman Tonja has been toppled by a coup. But he's an economist by training, and currently is the head of the mission of the African Development Bank in Chad. So I guess the message here from the junta is to say that we are appointing someone who is well known as an economist, hoping that the message would be that the mission is to tackle the economic situation. So we'll see how it goes. But right now, people are talking about the political situation.
Abdulrahman, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Abdulrahman Dia is VOA French to Africa Managing Editor. The Central African Republic's National Election Authority says that voters have overwhelmingly approved a draft constitution that appears to pave the way for Faustin Archange Touadera to seek a third term as president. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
Voters cast 95% of their ballots in favor and nearly 5% against, with a turnout of 61% in the July 30th referendum.
Les résultats provisoires.
The provisional ballots of the constitutional referendum of July 30th, 2023 are as follows. Validated polling stations, 5,043 out of 7,448. Total number of registered voters, 1,858,236. Total number of voters, 1,135,387.
With this referendum, there are no longer obstacles to prevent the 66-year-old head of state from seeking the presidency. Faustin Touadera's critics say he wants to remain president for life, under increasingly visible protection of the private Russian mercenary group Wagner. Dennis Matanda, adjunct professor of American politics and international business at Catholic University in Washington, says Touadera's regime will do whatever it takes to stay on.
It's a populist movement that can be created. The question is it sustainable?
Matanda argues that the leadership in the Central African Republic is out of touch with realities on the ground.
I worry so much that the leaders in power right now walk around and they think everything is fine. They have been so cut off from the land, from the things that drove them. I have had conversations with leaders who do not know that their people are dying, and yet their manifestos less than 5 years before were full of that anger.
Touadera was first elected in 2016 with the help of the French and the United Nations, as the country emerged from a civil war fought along sectarian lines following a coup. In 2020, Touadera won a second 5-year term after a vote interrupted by several incursions by armed groups. He also had to overcome allegations of fraud. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
As the conflict in Sudan rages on, it's forcing more and more people out of the country. Chadian horse-drawn cart owners are transporting Sudanese refugees and their belongings across the border into Chad. Alice Rizzo explains.
As the conflict in Sudan continues to force people out of the country, Chadian horse-drawn cart owners are transporting Sudanese refugees and their belongings across the border and into Chad.
When we were forced out because of the war, we came here with nothing. But my brother Yasser is going to help me anyway and take me to the camp. I thank him for that because I don't have any money and he still offered me a ride.
Whether the refugees have money or none at all, cart owners say they will help them make the journey.
These Sudanese do not have money and their conditions are rough. If they have some money, we help them, and even if they do not have any, we still help them.
Some taxis also operate by the border, doing several trips a day. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled to Chad since the conflict started in April between Sudan's army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, which erupted amid disputes over an internationally backed plan for a transition to civilian rule.
That was Alice Rizzo of Reuters reporting. United Nations appeals judges are ordering the war crimes trial for elderly Rwandan genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga indefinitely suspended because he has dementia, rejecting plans for an alternative slimmed-down procedure. The judges who are part of the court that succeeded the Rwanda War Crimes Tribunal are also ordering a lower trial chamber to quickly evaluate under what circumstances Kabuga could be released. The former businessman and radio station owner was one of the last suspects sought by the tribunal prosecuting crimes in the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, when ruling Hutu majority extremists killed more than 800,000 minority Tutsis and Hutu moderates in 100 days. He was arrested in France in 2020 after more than 20 years on the run. Fellows of the U.S. State Department-funded program, the Young African Leaders Initiative, say they are going through a transformative experience. VOA reporters Eric Manirakiza and Lionel Gahima met with a group of young participants hailing from 18 different sub-Saharan African countries at a farm in Maryland. Lionel Gahima has more.
The Young African Leaders Initiative, prestigious, or YALI, is breaking down geographical and cultural barriers. Fellows say uniting passionate and visionary minds from across the African continent. YALI offers these young Africans a unique opportunity to forge connections and embrace a fresh perspective on their homeland. Janice Love from Liberia admitted that she had little knowledge about Africa until she traveled to the U.S. for the YALI program and met other Africans from across the continent.
Honestly, I did not know Africa till I got here. I had to travel to the U.S. to know Africa. because being with 70 other African nationals in the same house and living together for the past 4 weeks has been so inspiring.
Through meaningful interactions and profound exchanges, the young leaders say they were able to discover one another's stories, sharing their unique experiences. Daniel Joshua, a pharmacist from Tanzania, said that he knew the name of some countries in Africa but lacked knowledge about their historical background until this program helped him discover more about African and American relationships.
I knew the countries. We studied geography in my country, but we only knew the countries by names, like, Cote d'Ivoire, Mauritania, Mauritius. But at some point, we were taught to introduce ourselves and give us a background of where you're coming from. I didn't know even Liberia was colonized by America. And they're like more of American than we all other parts of Africa are. So the fellowship is actually making me realize a lot of things which I didn't know about issues around leadership.
Lurato Sono, a lecturer at the University of Pretoria in South Africa, initially felt more drawn to the two other fellows from her country, but as she got comfortable, they formed relations with people from various countries.
I think relationships started to form across various nationalities because you get to know a person and you realize that you would think that we are different because we come from different countries and what you've heard about other countries, but I think we all enjoy each other's companies because we learn a lot about ourselves, about each other, about the countries, about the continent that we all want to collaborate in, developing.
So as the Mandela Washington Fellowship team, we are adding
Isaac Pambaloka, a public health specialist from Zambia, emphasized the importance of exchanging ideas and creating networks to foster African solutions for Africa's needs.
So this group is beautiful because it has representation to different countries. So that exchange of ideas, and also we're trying to create our networks within ourselves, because I do believe that the solutions Africa needs are coming and will come from us. Like Africa needs African solutions.
As Yali continues to empower and nurture these young African leaders, serving as a bridge to inspire change driven by its people, the continent's brightest minds are equipped with the tools and knowledge needed to build a prosperous Africa fueled by diversity, innovation, and a shared vision of progress. Eric Manirakiza and Lionel Gahima in Prince George's County, Maryland, VOA News.
Still to come, amid their struggle for survival in Somalia, Syrian refugees dream of returning home. Stay with us.
This week on Straight Talk Africa, we zero in on the deteriorating security situation in Haiti. Gang violence and kidnappings are spreading fear and pushing Haitians to seek refuge away from the capital, Port-au-Prince. Kenya is offering to send a police force to contain the violence, but many are concerned about police brutality. Join me, Heidi Adams, and my guests as we take a look at the role Kenya could play in Haiti.
In other news, the United Nations World Food Programme is slowly resuming food aid to Ethiopia nearly 5 months after suspending aid to millions of people after the discovery of a massive scheme to steal donated grain. The pause affected 20 million Ethiopians plus 800,000 refugees. Authorities in Cape Town, South Africa, are expressing concern after a taxi strike turned violent, leaving at least 2 people dead. Police say a person was shot and killed, and authorities later added another body, that of a 28-year-old man who sustained multiple gunshot wounds in an attack believed to be taxi-related. And at least 11 migrants are dead after a shipwreck off the coast of Tunisia in the Mediterranean Sea on Monday, and at least 44 others are missing, according to a judicial official. 2 have been rescued out of the 57 people aboard the boat. All are from sub-Saharan African countries. Authorities are continuing their search for the missing migrants. Syrian refugees struggling in Somalia are not giving up on their dreams to return home. Abdul Qadir Zubair reports from Mogadishu in this report, narrated by Salem Solomon.
Wa'il Rashid, a 28-year-old Syrian refugee, and his fellow countrywoman, 23-year-old Wafa Bizan, paint a grim picture of their lives in Somalia.
We came to Somalia as refugees. Life here is very difficult. Somalia is a poor country, and we are poor people.
To survive, they said, they rely on visiting markets and mosques, appealing to the kindness of strangers. Carrying a sign, they plead for help, but often receive only the equivalent of $1 or $2 a day. Rashid says he suffers from a medical condition that urgently requires surgery, but he can't get it without financial assistance.
I cannot work, and I am forced to stay at home. All I need is some help for the surgery.
Both Rashid and Bizan are hoping authorities might intervene and provide assistance to Syrian refugees and poor Somalis in the country. Bizan shared her own challenges, including health issues that impede her ability to walk for extended periods.
Even as I'm sitting down here now, I feel the pain. We deprive ourselves and our children of food to be able to pay rent. My children there are all sick due to hunger. It's a tough situation.
Amid hardships, some Syrian refugees in Somalia have managed to rebuild their lives. Mahmoud Abdulhamid Saleh, a 40-year-old dentist and maxillofacial specialist from Syria, says when he arrived in Mogadishu in 2018, he found opportunities he could not in war-torn Syria.
The economic situation was bad because of the war. It's actually worse now.
Despite the challenges, Saleh says he received a warm reception from his Somali hosts. After 2 years, he brought his family to Somalia and they've built a new life together. His children attend Somali schools and have integrated into the local community.
My wife is now an Arabic language teacher at the Somali school. She works with Somali children and teaches them Arabic. She's more popular than me here.
Saleh himself has established a reputable position at an Egyptian hospital in Mogadishu, specializing in complex maxillofacial surgeries. For now, Saleh intends to stay in Mogadishu, but he remains hopeful the situation in Syria will improve someday. For Abdul Qadir Zubair in Mogadishu, Somalia, Salem Solomon, VOA News.
The World Health Organization warns that many young Africans are turning to substance abuse. The United Nations predicts that by 2030, the number of drug users in Africa will have increased substantially. Health reporter Mkamiti Kibayasi has more. Hello, Mkamiti.
Hello, Esther. Unfortunately, this phenomenon is not adequately documented across many areas on the continent, despite known negative health and social consequences on affected individuals and their communities. Drug addiction is complex disease, and quitting usually takes more than good intentions or strong will. To learn more about the problem as well as treatment, I am joined live via Skype by Dr. Lauren Kemunto, a general practitioner in Nairobi, Kenya. Hello, Dr. Lauren.
Hello to you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. What leads young people into drug use?
So mainly peer pressure and the desire to fit in, curiosity, idleness from unemployment, availability and ease of access to these drugs, glamorizing of the media on drug use by celebrities and all of that, as well as stress.
And what are the common drugs of abuse and who are the most victims, male or female?
So the most common drugs are alcohol, cannabis or marijuana, cat, tobacco, nicotine, cocaine, heroin, inhalants, among others. And between females and males, males are found to be more prone to this.
Dr. Kemunto, what is the impact of drug abuse among the young in African countries?
So it has an array of effects, starting with physical and mental health effects. So they can get bloodborne infections, especially the intravenous drug users, and diseases such as depression and psychosis. It also causes increased truancy at work and in school with poor performance. There's also increased crime rates and violence, as well as financial implications on the individual and the family because of increased demand for medical and rehabilitation services. So in the long term, there's a threat to our future generations.
I know you meet these cases day by day. How long does treatment take, and is it possible for the victim to relapse into substance abuse after treatment?
Yes, so we see a lot of these cases, especially among the youth. Duration of treatment depends on the substance use and the severity of dependence. So it's a wide variation from a few hours to several days. What was the other question?
And how do we effectively, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. How do we effectively tackle the issue of youth drug abuse?
So we need concerted effort from the law enforcement team, from parents, the community, and the youth themselves. So we need public education programs for the youth, including peer counseling. We need enactment of laws and strengthening of these regulatory bodies so that we can identify and eliminate the sources as well as distribution channels. We need to create employment opportunities for the youth to avoid idleness. And then also we need to provide and endorse affordable and accessible rehabilitation services to all.
What is the role for families and guardians to make sure their loved one healing well and faster?
So they need to accept the situation and try and understand the basis or the reason for this drug use or abuse, and then commit themselves to provide not just financially but also social support to the youth or their family members in getting treatment.
And in your hospital, where do you get funds or donors to support your program to make sure youth are standing in the right path due to treatment?
Okay, so we get support first from the government. We have these regulatory bodies such as NACADA that provide supportive funds and services. And then also we receive support from non-governmental organizations or just individuals that are touched by this cause.
Thanks, Dr. Kemunto. Dr. Lorraine Kemunto is a general practitioner in Nairobi, Kenya. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you very much, Mkamiti. That was very informative. And thanks for joining us on Africa 54. Be sure to watch our health reports every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that does it for our show today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.